for today, we'll be looking at sine rule. So sine rule says that one side divided by the sine of its opposite angle is equivalent in value to another side being divided by the sine of its angle. So putting it into visuals. So it's saying that if you get this side A here, if you should divide it by the angle that is opposite to it and the sine of the angle that's opposite to it, and then you take this side here and divide it by the sine of its angle that's opposite to it, both answers will be the same thing. So by extension, it now says that A divided by the sine of its angle is equal to B divided by the sine of its angle equal to C, which is the sine of its angle. So it's saying that once you divide any side of a triangle and sine the angle that's opposite to it, if you should repeat that process, you will always be getting the same answer, as long as the side is divided by the sine of its opposite angle. So if we get a blank triangle now, let's say this is angle M, this is N. So it's saying that if you should be given a triangle with the angles M and N, the side that is opposite to the angle has the same name. So if this is M, out here will also be M. If this is N, here will also be N, because they must be opposite. It's also saying that if you should take this M here and say, alright, I'm dividing it by the sine of its opposite angle, it will be the same value as taking this N and divide it by the sine of its angle. So that's what the rule of sine says. Now let's put it into principle or application. So here we have the variable x and we are trying to find that value. So it's saying, based on the sine rule, it says that if we have x here, we can write it, so x, so the side must always go to the top of the fraction. So x being divided by the sine of its angle is equivalent or equal in value to dividing another side by the sine of that angle. So when you get here, you can work it by two ways. Either you just change this into a decimal and then you work it through if you're good with decimals. So it will be changing this to a decimal by dividing the numerator by the denominator, and then you multiply this by it. Or if you are not good with decimals and you prefer to work with fractions, you can cross multiply and work through. So it would be x times this and this times this. So it would technically be read as 15 times sine 50 is equal to whatever the variable is times the sine of the next part. And then you work this part out. So 15, or, so you can work this part out and then you get that value and then you divide it by this. Or you can just simply say, write this back, so that's 15 times sine 50, and whatever you had here to multiply the variable, you put it underneath to say divide by it. When you get here now, you just put everything on your calculator. So the advantage of doing this over changing them over into decimal is that sometimes, because you will have to round off, it will lose a little part of the answer. So when you have it as a full-on decimal fraction until the very end, and then you put it all in your calculator, you will get the choice or the closest value to what it actually is, versus when you start rounding off things into a decimal. So this will be 15 times sine 50 divided by sine 40. That gives you 17.88 cm. And that's rounded off to two decimal places. So what I was referring to, so if you had gotten it up here, and you say, alright, changing this to a decimal, so it would be x over sine 50 still is equal to 15 divided by sine 40, which would be 23.34. And then when you get here, you would cross multiply just the same. So imagine that there's a 1 here, x times 1 would still be x here. And then it would be the 23.34 times the sine 50. And that would give you 17.8788 rounded off. So even though the answers are the same, if you put both of them on your calculator, you realize that the decimals that come after are slightly different, but because they are rounded off, it comes back to the exact same answer at the end of the day. So either way you choose, it will give you the same answer. Now, this is when you want a side. But what to do if you are trying to find an angle? You start out the process the same way. So it's going to be the side that you know, so that's 10 over the opposite side, so that's sine 48. That should be equal to the other two sides, so that's the 14 that you know over the sine of the other angle. Process, you work it out. So you can still cross multiply, or you can work it as a decimal, which one you prefer. So I'll just change it to a decimal for ease of sake. So 10 divided by sine 48 is equal to 13.46. Now when you get here, it's basically the same thing, cross multiply. So imagine that 1 is there, you cross multiply. So it would be 13.46 times sine y is equal to 14, because 14 1 is 14. Now you want the sine y by itself, so you'll have to divide both sides by the 13.46. So when you divide this side by 13.46, or whatever number is there, it will cancel out or eliminate each other. So it will be equal to sine y equals the number that's on the other side divided by whatever it was here. And then you work that part. So it's going to be 14 divided by 13.46 equals 1.04. So that sine y is equal to 1.04. Now here, the process that I want you to get is that when you get here and you're trying to find an angle, you cannot just simply put that y is equal to and divide both sides by sine. No, you have to put whatever the variable is divided by the inverse of this sine. So it will be sine inverse, and then you put whatever number it was that you got. So that's how you would write it. Now to get the sine inverse part based on principle, it would be just simply saying sine, press shift on your calculator, and then you search for sine, and then you press it, and you will get this second function. Or if it, depending on the calculator that you have, you might have to search for 2nd, which is the second function, and then you press that, then you press sine, and you get the opposite of what sine is, or the inverse of sine. When you get that now, you type in the number that you get afterwards, and you put that in. Now based on this equation, it would not necessarily give you an answer on the premise that the numbers that were chosen are not able to give you an answer. So once you get here, if it was a case where this was 0.04, it would give you an actual mathematical answer. But because these are just random numbers, this here, the 1 point something, there is no possibility of getting an answer for any number that is above 1 when you're dealing with sine inverse. So in this case, it will say on your calculator math error. And that's the principle. So it's saying that if you have a side that is 10 meters long, another side that's 40 meters long, if the angle is 48 there, you cannot have another. The angle here is not possible to be created because something would be incorrectly drawn. So that's basically it. So the principle is that you will try to put this side at the top, just like always, the angle at the bottom, and then you will start solving for it. If you are trying to find the angle, when you get to this final step here, where you are going to try to transpose to get the variable by itself, it's going to be second function or the shift function, press sine, and then you type in whatever value you had, and that will give you an answer. So once you're able to remember that the sides always goes to the top, the sine of the angle always goes to the bottom, and then you start to solve it mathematically, you will get the final answer. So if you get an actual answer, or by following all the steps and procedures, you get math error, you do not need to fret as long as you've followed all the steps. So I hope this video would have helped you in understanding how to solve questions using the sine rule. So tune in again with Mr. Brown while I explain other mathematical concepts.